Ladies and gentlemen, Charles Bukowski.
This is Charles Bukowski. Oh, shoot.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to finally the third episode of the Bukowski podcast. And on this episode, today we're going to be going over poems and insults, and I'm going to be doing it with my good poet buddy, Ethan McGuire. We talk a lot about Bukowski, a lot about Bukowski's history, also a lot more than just poems and insults. We go over like a whole world of stuff, everything from his early writings to pulp. Like, we go all up and down the board. And then we also talk about writing in general, creating, being friends with other writers and artists. We talk about we actually do a lot about the Slee Ricketts podcast. We talk a lot about that. It's basically the fan show for that. But we also talk about like hip hop and rap, all the way to Dylan Thomas, to Adam Sandler. Okay, we were all over the place, but it was a really good talk, really good conversation. Make sure you pick up Ethan's new book, Apocalypse Dance, wherever fine books are sold. This episode of the Bukowski podcast is brought to you by mattwallart.com. I'm having a huge sale this weekend, June 28th and 29th, where you can get up to 40% off, actually up to 50% off if you're a member of the channel here on YouTube, but 40 to 50% off all my limited edition signed and numbered chapbooks, all the way to my big pieces of art. It's just this weekend. If you are a member, you get early bird whatever on Friday, the 27th. So if you hear this right when it goes up, you'll know about the sale. So run on over to mattwallart.com and check that stuff out. And hey, if you just want to be an awesome motherfucker and you really want something, just go get it now. Also, before I forget, in the Bukowski book club, we finished Rooming House Madrigals, and you can watch the videos for that. But we are now in Septuagenarian Stew, and I will be posting the first video of this for the Bukowski book club maybe tomorrow. We'll find out. If you want to read that, if you want to read along that book with all of us, jump in on that. Okay. And if you are a follower on Substack, drop me a line and let me know, or hit me up on Substack, because I'm new to the whole Substack thing, and we'll see how it's working out. Again, I just want to thank Ethan McGuire. Speaking of Substack, if you want to go to Ethan's Substack, it is theflummox.substack.com, I believe. And there will be links down below for it anyway. And he has his own podcast too. He's an editor of a couple different magazines. He's just a cool dude, and we had a lot of fun talking. So Ethan, thank you, and here is my conversation with Ethan.
Amplitude, do you hear me? Okay, let's get started. What the hell? Come on.
I've been doing work as a contributing editor over at New Verse Review,
Nice.
And I am now working as the web editor for another publication that Matthew Buckley Smith is associated with it, and that's the Tar River Poetry. I don't know if you've heard him talking about that. Alice Allen is on the board, advisory board there.
Nice.
And they brought me on as their web editor. So I've got that going on as well, and I started a Substack, and I started a podcast.
Yeah, I was going to ask about all that, dude.
Yeah. No, it's all going good, but I'm not moving as fast as I want on any of that stuff. And I'm glad I released the book. Like, my reason for, I'm glad that I got the book out when I started being a contributing editor at New Verse Review. I think that's nice to have that just in both directions. And then I started the Substack as just kind of a way of making myself a little bit more organized and official. Since I was one of the contributing editors at New Verse Review and doing work with Tar River Poetry, I had an author's website that was basically Substack style over on a WordPress site. and I wanted to move it over to Substack just because that's kind of a hotbed right now. A lot of people are moving over there, especially since Twitter has fallen apart even more than it was previously.
Yeah.
And a lot of writers and other people have started moving to Substack. Plus, Substack has just been getting a little bit better as a platform. And so I went ahead and did the huge lift to migrate my entire original author site over to Substack, and then started doing new stuff over there. And then also started a podcast over there, and I'm releasing episodes every other week on
Yeah.
that one. So yeah, I've been keeping myself busy, and I've been busy and just making myself even busier.
Okay, so Poems and Insults, dude.
Heck yeah.
How'd you like it?
No, I enjoyed it. So, you know, uh, m- my first exposure to Bukowski was like I think is like most people is Post Office, right?
Yeah,
Like
for
his
real.
1971 novel. And I remember like right after college reading and like discussing that with a friend of mine at a coffee shop. But then I didn't read Bukowski a lot more after that. And it really wasn't actually until kind of getting to know you these
Mhm.
last and I was just trying to think about how, like I think it was 3 years ago like we first wrote each other. So I've gotten way more exposure to him over the last 3 years just because of knowing you and hearing you talk
Yeah.
about him and stuff like that. By the way, I know you're not doing the I Hate Matt Wall poetry podcast anymore, but there was one episode you did, and I was trying to look it up, and I saw that it was episode 106, but that I really liked. It was with that guy, Michael D. Malone, you interviewed.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That was one of my favorite things that you have done, like because you've done a few different like podcast episodes and
Mhm.
YouTube videos and stuff like that on Bukowski. But I actually that discussion about Bukowski that you had on that episode with that guy
Yeah.
actually kind of like made me more interested in him, like even
Yeah.
than I had been before, even since hearing you talk about him. Um, so um, I wouldn't really say that I'm a huge like a fan a Bukowski fan.
Yeah.
But he's also one of these guys who has written so much stuff. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, like probably thousands of poems, right? And like hundreds of short stories, probably,
Yeah.
right? Like and a few different novels too. So it is kind of like just about anyone could find something that they like in there, probably.
Yeah.
Um, so since this, but he has this poem. Such
That's
a funny
cool.
name for a poem, but it
Yeah.
like also reminds me of like a part of that the Ralph Ellison novel Invisible Man.
Mhm.
Um, and I have no idea if he had that in his mind when he wrote that poem, but yeah. So I have found some stuff that I really like of his, um, but it's it's here and there. His whole persona, the kind of like character that he played
Mhm.
um, through his life, is not necessarily super appealing to me.
Yeah.
Um, and I do think there are some people since then who have taken some of what he did and did it better.
Yeah.
He is a poet to me that I feel was definitely influenced by like Hemingway,
Mhm.
but kind of like that further and like in a much dirtier, grimier everyday sort of way. And of course, like very focused on LA.
Yeah.
Um, and and also like as I was listening to this poems and insults, I was thinking that there are certain ways like where he's influenced by LA that sort of I don't know if this is gonna make sense, but sort of like remind me of like those like crime and detective writers of like the early to mid 1900s, kind of like Raymond Chandler stuff.
Yeah.
But then you like mix in some like Kafka and other stuff like that. And then of course, there's influence in there of like the Beats and the confessional poets like Ginsberg and John Berryman and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And then also there's this like in him as I was listening to it and I was reading some more of his poems too. I was thinking about how like a lot of the Beats did, especially Kerouac, of course, there's this like fairly extreme vulgarization of some of the like the English medieval and Renaissance like Chinese and Japanese poets.
Yeah.
There's some of that drawn in there, especially like the sparseness of the language and sometimes the way images are used very plainly, like a lot of times where just the images are put very stark against each other.
Yeah.
Um, and there's also, I was thinking about how there's this line that you can draw with him. Basically, if you think about Walt Whitman sort of being the big disturber of like, like very formal poetry, right? Like way back in the 1800s, all the way up to another California poet, Robinson Jeffers, to
Yeah.
Bukowski. And I think that sort of line from Whitman to Robinson Jeffers to Bukowski is a very is not actually a line that necessarily even goes through the Beats and the confessional poets.
Yeah.
But whereas Robinson Jeffers is very stark and nihilistic and cynical, talking like basically preferring like nature and stuff like that, and just being very again, just like having this kind of Nietzschean influence nihilism about it. I
Yeah.
feel like Bukowski, on the other hand, goes in sort of a different direction and just like embraces, instead of the nature of trying to get away from the city, he like goes into it, like,
Yeah.
a little more, just more into the heart of it. So there's that, and that's definitely, Walt Whitman played the kind of country man character,
Yeah.
like not gentleman, but like kind of a, like famously, there's that picture of him with the butterfly on his finger, but actually the butterfly is not real. It's like a cloth butterfly. I feel like there is some of that to Bukowski, where he's, and I think it's obviously lived a real life like that, and
Yeah.
in that way, he definitely was a lot. There's so many similarities to kind of the way he did things, and like a lot of the punks, like in music, right?
For real.
But very highly California specific, LA specific, it seems like to me. But
Yeah.
he's very postmodern, but trying to appeal to the man on the street, especially that like the man in the mid to late 20th century. But there's a side of him too that I always find is sometimes a little distracting, where it's like that modernism, like that kind of like Poundian modernism never really totally left his system, and there's always like little bits of it in him,
Yeah.
and sometimes it works really well and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But one thing I think is interesting, and one thing, and the reason I say all that, it may sound like a digression, but I don't mean it to be, because I feel like, unlike a lot of the collections of Bukowski that I've read before, I actually really enjoyed the way he put his poems together in the Poems and Insults album that we listened to.
Yeah.
I thought that it highlighted a lot of those things that I just mentioned really well, but appealed very, very specifically to like the kind of the identity that he crafted for himself. And, it shows how he took all these like influences that he had and kind of the life that he lived. And he did live a hard life. There's no doubt about that. I don't mean to imply that he didn't. But like the way that he vulgarizes all of those and makes them more obscene and very like I very punk, and I don't even know if he would have appreciated that as a way to describe him. But yeah, so I think that all of that makes sense that he would make this album, and I actually think that for his work, for the time that he made it, being that it was in was it 1973?
Yeah.
When he did that hour-long reading at City Lights, the Poets Theater in San Francisco there.
Yeah.
Another thing that it made me think is, I think I might like Bukowski more on audio, like reading his own work.
His readings are great. They're really
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely going to seek more of those out, and I've already listened to some more since listening to this for this podcast episode that we're doing. But it just makes sense in a way. Like there is that beat confessional influence in him, but also what I realized is he is very influenced by some of those comics that were, and he's very original in his own way too. But some of those comics of that time, like in New York, Las Vegas, L.A., San Francisco, places like that. Even I felt a sort of like similar feeling to you get when you listen to old recordings of Lenny Bruce.
I was just gonna say he was a huge Lenny Bruce fan.
Okay, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
He makes a really fun stand-up.
Yeah.
And there's also this kind of way of, that kind of like Norm Macdonald defiance of the crowd, like just like, I love being hated by you guys, kind of thing. And, there's still a lot of his persona, like he kind of plays it off as if, he doesn't really like being there, like he doesn't really want to be there. But at the same time, you can tell that he does, he does enjoy like being there, and he does enjoy the applause and the people yelling at him and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so it's an energy that really, like you said, like Lenny Bruce really does feel. And and it just made me think of a lot of different things, like what I talked about, and even another weird thing. This is a digression, but it made me think of how these kind of attitudes, like similar to Bukowski, kind of got brought into like outlaw country music in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah.
I noticed that as he was performing his poetry, it made me think about the comics, but also made me think about that too. Just the like, and one part, I forget if it's at the beginning, because some of the different releases of the album, it seems like kind of order
Yeah.
the tracks in different ways. But he comes out there and he says, what is it he says? He's like, "This is Charles Bukowski," is what he says. And it reminds me of the "Hi, I'm Johnny Cash" thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like coming out there all confident like that. And so anyway, all that is kind of a bunch of stuff that was swirling in my head while I was listening to it. And also just I wish more poetry readings were like that.
I was
That
just
would be
gonna say, like, I think like besides open mics, like listening to Bukowski do poetry readings was what I assumed poetry readings would be like. And so when I would go do a poetry reading and then it wasn't like that, I was like, what the fuck's going on? So then I would get like mad and indignant and I'd be like, what the fuck's wrong with you people?
they would be like, what is going on?
Yeah, and it's just like it that doesn't carry well. But so many things to add to what you were saying. So as far as like him uh liking the poetry readings, like I think he liked the audience. I think he liked being the star of the show,
Sure. Yeah.
especially from his background, like being the nobody and now
Yeah.
constant this other shit. But it was really hard for him. And
Okay.
he would like be so nervous beforehand. He would be puking and
Oh, wow.
he was like so fucking drunk. But it got to the point where his last reading he did, I think, was in 81. And he talks about how much it's like a soul suck and how
Yeah.
if you like there's a good video like reading. Um it's his last reading. I can't remember what it's called. It's called like The Last Something, but it's at the Sweetwater in Redondo Beach. And I feel like if he really loved doing it as much as we would think he loved doing it, he would have been doing that the last like 15 years of his life, you know?
Yeah.
But like as much as he likes it, because like even at the end, like at the end of the Poems and Insults, because there's like two poems added to it from an earlier reading. But
Yeah. I could tell. I thought that might be the case. So thank you for
yeah,
telling me.
but he's like, yeah, let's just call it quits. Like he'll just like stop abruptly. He's like, fuck it,
I like that. Yeah. I
I
like that
can't
a lot.
fucking do this. Um, but there's that. But going back to like the medieval poets and like he was huge into like Li Po and
Hmm.
what's his
I can
name?
tell. Yeah.
Tu
Du Fu.
Tu Fu, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Who
so
wouldn't be, man? Du
yeah,
Fu.
really into that stuff too. But Robinson Jeffers, I think, was his favorite poet ever.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't
like
know that.
he has
That
a
makes total
he has a
sense.
lot of poems that are either about him or dedicated to him. In fact, I think one of his first books, the title was taken from a line of his. It catches my heart in its hands.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so he was huge on him.
Well, I hopefully nobody listening to this from your audience will be upset that I'm, such a novice
Oh,
on.
no, 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 no. I don't
I'm
think
just
so at
getting
all.
this.
Like I think having conversations about him is awesome. Like and
Yeah.
like I don't know, like I don't want to say like I'm a scholar on him, but I probably have an unhealthy knowledge of like everything about.
Well, I found when I've listened to your videos and podcast episodes on Bukowski, I felt like they were a lot more informative than most of what I've heard online, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, thank you.
I don't know. He's like one of those, I don't know why, but he's like one of those guys for some reason who like attracts really ill-informed like pieces and videos. Like you'll see these video essays and you can just tell, even if you don't know the subject, you can just tell that they are not like that well informed.
Yeah. Well,
And
like a lot of them are just like, hey, I went on Wikipedia, I found some stuff, and
yeah,
so they're not great. Like usually whenever I see someone do a video on Bukowski, I like there was a period where I was like reviewing people who were doing reviews of Bukowski.
I remember you doing that a little bit.
And I'm like, oh my God, you have this so wrong. But even like when you were talking about like his persona being like bigger than whatever, and like that is kind of off-putting and stuff. Like I feel like what a lot of people don't get is that a lot of the persona about him, like I don't think he started believing it and living it until like the very late 60s, early 70s, like right before this period from the Poems and Insults. And then that kind of
Mhm.
lasted until like 78, 79. And then
Okay.
he became like the suburban, like wealthy dude, and
Yeah.
the whole, and so he was going through this thing. So all his books that he put out in the 80s, it's like this weird push and pull where it's like, I know people like when I write about hard luck shit, so I'll write about something that happened 40 years ago, but at the same time, I'm driving a fucking BMW now or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
Well,
uh,
I felt like that came out in that episode that you did all the way a couple of years ago or whatever it was with that Michael Malone guy. Is
yeah,
that how you pronounce his name?
yeah, I think
He
it's,
felt like
yeah,
he did talk about that. And that may have been where I was kind of getting that idea from. It's not necessarily that I find his persona super off-putting. I mean, it's calculated to be off-putting, of course, to a certain degree, but just that it's I guess I thought just it made me think a lot more about like how stand-ups will often have a persona,
yeah,
like a Larry Bruce or a Norm Macdonald or somebody like that. I'm
yeah,
I'm using those two guys because those were two guys who were like famously like defiant of the crowd, you know what I mean?
yeah.
But also like in each of those cases, in the two cases of the stand-ups that I mentioned, both of them had a lot of like insecurities in their own lives that kind of led to them building those personas. So it makes total sense that Bukowski would do a similar thing. I think that makes sense.
You know that part where he's like 100 years ago, motherfuckers like you killed Dylan Thomas. I'm not gonna let
Yeah.
you do that to me. That's always such a funny thing. I was just listening to it. I have the audiobook of South and No North right here. And most of the stuff from this reading was in the Taylor Hackford Bukowski documentary.
Okay.
And because that was when he took the PBS crew, they were making the documentary about him, and they went up to San Francisco and did the whole fucking thing or whatever. So when you know that that reading is from that period and that moment, like the documentary goes into the after party and what happened afterwards and the fight him and Linda got into.
Oh
And
man.
it was like, have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen
Oh,
that.
oh, dude, it's fucking amazing. It's so good. But she,
Because even in that reading, he calls her out and
yeah,
is like the most beautiful woman in the world.
yeah. And then
Although you can tell there's probably some stuff going on between them.
yeah, she started flirting with some guy, and he got mad, and they got into a fight, and then she clawed his face up really good, and then she left him there.
I haven't watched that documentary, but I have heard about this.
Yeah, it's bad. And so that's when he like called up the Liza chick to, but like if you read Women, there's parts of this that are in that. But the this story in South and No North is called This Is What Killed Dylan Thomas. And it's so funny because he's like talking about like how weird it is for him to go to a town where everyone, because in LA no one knew who he was. Like people would come up to him every now and then, but he could like walk around and have it not be a fucking thing. But when he went up to San Francisco, he was like a fucking celebrity. His face was
Yeah,
fucking posters all over fucking North Beach, like for the fucking reading and shit. And
yeah,
that's just fucking weird. And there's a couple other really good stories and poems about when he tried to do like he got asked to do readings with like people like Ginsberg or and
mm,
then he like made an ass of himself in front of Ginsberg and like started like talking shit to him and like and then what did he say? He said John Cage. Is that who he said?
yeah. That's the person you mentioned. Yeah,
Yeah, John Cage got paid $1,000 to eat an apple. I'm just gonna sit and drink these beers.
yeah.
Uh,
That was awesome.
but like all of the like there's a part of me that always thinks that he mentions these things to try to show the literati of the time. Like, hey, I might not have the same background as you, but I am
Yeah,
educated. Like,
yeah.
um, because like Dylan Thomas, like died from alcoholism, right? Like,
I think so. Yeah, I think that's right.
but like I've always wondered, like, was there like a myth going around that like back then that like he was killed by audiences or like he was got killed during a reading or something like that?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I just assumed that. Let me. Yeah. Um. Yeah. Yeah. He died. Let's see. Well, he went crazy, kind of. Part of it.
As we
Uh,
all do.
yeah. And let's see. It says here it's now believed that Thomas had been suffering from bronchitis, pneumonia, emphysema, and asthma. But let's see. Yeah, it was after a big drinking bender that he went on. Yeah. And it looks like he was doing some kind of drugs. Yeah, he was doing some various kinds of drugs as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, I'm sure too that like he probably hated doing readings. And so, like, the fact that Dylan Thomas hated doing readings made Bukowski go, yeah, readings are stupid. Like, something along those lines is like the best I could like add things up. Maybe he didn't. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was kind of reading like, yeah, it looks like it was just after, yeah, he got sick after a bunch of drinking and drug using benders, it looks like. And then yeah, it was after it kind of all oh yeah, it kind of looks like it all kind of took a he got ill after a performance.
Okay.
And it kind of was all downhill from there, basically.
There it is.
So you're probably right about that. There we go. A live investigation.
Yeah. Do you like Dylan Thomas at all?
You know, I'm not as into him as some people are. Um, I mean, he's obviously like I can recognize that he was, a really great poet, and he has a lot of really great poems for sure. I can't deny that. He's not really someone I look to a lot and really read a lot though.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of poems or poets from kind of the late 1800s and the early 1900s in like England and stuff like that, and Europe and stuff like that. That it seems like everyone in poetry loves. That
Yeah.
I can always recognize it, like that it's great, but I just have trouble with like Gerard Manley Hopkins is one of those for me. It's like seems like most poets love him, and I can just never get into his poetry.
Yeah.
Um, so he kind of falls into a similar kind of place for me, and similar to like some of his own influences, like Thomas Hardy and stuff like that. Um, I kind of, unfortunately, I kind of lump them all into a similar group for myself, which is that I can recognize that they're really great, but I just have never really been able to immerse myself in their work. There was one thing I was kind of proud though, because he was a reporter. He was Welsh, and he was a reporter for the South Wales Daily Post, which is now the South Wales Evening Post. And there was a while back, they started publishing haiku and Sinryu for a while. And I actually got a Sinryu in the South Wales Evening Post,
Oh,
which
shit.
he was a reporter there. And so I kind of, even though I'm not the biggest fan, I'm kind of like proud of that.
So you have a connection.
There you go. Even
Yeah.
though it's a tabloid, it's completely just a tabloid now. It's just a
Yeah.
Welsh tabloid, what it is. But I was still proud of that. And probably one of my most read poems, even though I don't,
Do you
to be
remember
honest.
it?
Let me remember to quote it.
Yeah.
Blistering heat, withering tourist, praying for winter. The
There you go.
blistering heat, withering tourists, praying for winter.
There it is, dude.
Appeared in the South Wales Evening Post. Might be my most read poem of all time.
Were there any poems in the reading that stuck out to you as poems more than his performance?
Oh, well, yeah, definitely. So you're saying like if we think about spoken word poetry, it doesn't
Yeah.
really work on the page. And then so you're asking like if there were ones where I was like, I just really liked it as a poem.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have some down here. So one of my favorites was the death one.
Dude, that is my favorite fucking poem of his.
Oh, really?
I love
Yeah,
that so much. And it's not available anywhere. That's what drives me
Oh,
crazy.
well, no, I heard that and it was like I think it's definitely in my top poems I've read from him.
Yeah.
My favorite is probably still the one about him wanting to overthrow the government, but only overthrowing a person's wife. That's probably some, but no, just the juxtaposition. And one thing I noticed in this reading is I feel like, of course, he's typical, confessional, descended free verse kind of poetry, but not typical rather, but like a lot of the poetry that descended from the confessional poets and the beat poets, it's free verse in a certain way. But what I realized listening to this album is that there actually are like formal poetry elements that he kind of hides on the page that sort of come out.
Yeah.
Moments where he has meter, moments where he has rhyme.
Yeah.
And there were several poems here where I noticed that coming out. I was like, oh, he has a rhyme in here that when he reads it just feels really obvious, but on the page is not obvious at all. No, but I love that death one because, it's this hilarious story of death out in front of his house, like messing with ants and spiders and like getting them to eat each other. And then, this woman keeps calling him on the phone and he keeps talking to her and his plumbing isn't working. And
yeah, it's fucking.
and it was that one, this death one, and then the earthquake one. And then what I'm talking about is that one, and then looking through what was another one? There are several here, like the death one, like the earthquake one, like the 18 cars full of men thinking about what could have been, like the sex fiends one.
Oh, that's fucking hysterical.
Where it's really effective, especially when he's reading it. But some of these really effective just as poems, I feel like, too, at kind of describing what the experience of like, and I'm going to use a hoity-toity word here, but modernity, what the experience of modernity is like for the average person. Just like the person who lives in lives in an apartment in a big city like LA, doesn't have a lot of money, is trying to live life, trying to meet people, but what that is like in the modern world, you know,
Yeah.
with all of the just everything being so confusing, knowing about too many things,
Mhm.
trying to like almost like doing this thing where you're trying to isolate yourself in order to get some peace, but then that further distances you from everyone else.
Yeah.
There were several poems he read here in that album that were a lot like that. And I feel like 18 Cars Full of Men Thinking About What It Could Have Been is one of the ones that are most like that. Also, another poem where a couple of different times you hear him rhyming coming up, a few other kind of like poetic metrical moments as well that he is definitely hiding on the page. When I'd read that poem on the page, I didn't think anything of it, but when he read it out loud, that reminded me of it and then made me kind of look at it differently. Um, but then there's also, he makes a lot of obvious allusions to poetic figures like Hemingway, Ezra Pound, people
Mhm.
like that. But there's some other moments that I thought I wondered if he was making references to like more subtle references to other people as well. Like he has one of the poems he reads is The Death of an Idiot.
Mhm.
And when he read it, although it has nothing to do with the story, it made me instantly think of Dostoevsky's
Yeah.
The Idiot. And in a way, the poem, if you read it like that, it's almost, Dostoevsky was, in the end, a lot of Dostoevsky is sort of like a hard fought, hard won rejection of nihilism. But
Mhm.
there's also a lot of times at the end of the Dostoevsky's work, it's a lot like religion comes in all of a sudden or something like
Yeah.
that. And I felt like in this poem, The Death of an Idiot, it was almost kind of like Bukowski, like rejecting Dostoevsky
Yeah,
almost.
because he was a huge fan of his early on.
Hmm. But
And
then became less so later.
when Dostoevsky found God,
Okay.
like
Okay.
he kind of like Dos gave up, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But yeah, totally. Like I feel that one too. And like for me, like going back to like the theme you were talking about earlier, like the shoelace and
Yeah.
even
Shoelace is definitely like that.
yeah, and then the adding on of the last two, the report upon consumption, or I can't remember the title of it, but that is very much like that. But the something for the touts, the nuns, the grocery clerks, and you, that
Yes.
that is very much like because like I think when Bukowski shines the most is when he's basically doing like a list poem,
Yeah.
but it's like these are all the fucking things, and then here's the metaphor, you know?
Yeah.
Like I
Well,
think his strongest thing.
the shoelace was to me of this album the strongest poem like that. Um, like I love that he says the series of small tragedies that send a man to the madhouse, and then he does a really effective series of small tragedies,
Yeah.
and it really is evocative, and it's like I said, it is like a perfect encapsulation of sort of the oppression of living in modern day life, just all of the things,
Yeah.
like feeling that we shouldn't be having this many things happening to us. It should be fewer things happening.
No, I'm there right now, dude. But it's
Yeah,
like
no, I feel you.
the thing about the shoelace too that's so fucking like I don't want to say profound, but it's like you can have all these fucking things happen and
Yeah,
it's just like building and building and building and building, and then that one little stupid fucking thing,
yeah,
and like and you're fucking gone, like that's
yeah,
it. Like it's like that is so how everything is. That's how every fucking thing is.
yeah.
And that one's huge.
Yeah, that is probably one of my new favorites of his. Also, I love how it ends, and I'll contrast it with one of the earlier ones. But um, so you got the shoelace and 18 Cars Full of Men Thinking About What Could Have Been. Both of them really good poems, I think, in a lot of ways. I think that the shoelace is more effective because I love how it ends with basically. I forget exactly the wording of it, the line, but it's basically like, so be careful next time you bend over.
Yeah, for real.
It's a perfect ending to the poem. Whereas 18 Cars Full of Men Thinking About What Could Have Been, he almost ends it perfectly. But I feel like he goes two words too far. He says something like, what is it? He's like, and it was sunset and heavy traffic and heavy life. But I feel like he should have ended it at the heavy traffic. He shouldn't have added heavy life.
Well, it's funny
Because
you
he
say
already had
that
this
because
long poem.
like what poem is it? Is it I think it's called The Best Love Poem I Could Write Right Now or something like that.
That's the first one he reads on the Spotify album,
Oh my God, that's weird.
Spotify version of it. Yeah,
Um
well,
but
okay, so
that one ends like he reads it or whatever, does his thing, and then you could hear the crowd pop.
mhm.
And then like he waits, and then there's one more line. And I'm like,
Yes.
no,
Yeah.
dude, like you ended at the pop.
I know. He has a few moments like that to where it's like where you were saying like he enjoys the attention, but he didn't love doing the reading. And
Yeah.
I think that it is in moments like that to where he's actually really good at it. But
Hmm.
if he loved it, he would know to stop.
Well, it's just
But since he doesn't love it,
and that goes back to like I don't want to talk too much about me and my dumb shit, but like
no, I
wrestling,
mean this is your podcast, man.
like my wrestling background, you know what I'm saying? Like you play to the pop, you know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? And you tell the story and you let the crowd dictate
yeah,
like when you go to the finish. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? And
yeah,
so like whenever like I see anything like that or hear anything like that where like you get a pop and like that's not the end and you just keep going, you're like, oh, you're gonna lose the crowd. You can't
yeah.
teach.
I mean, it is possible to get them back, and
Oh, for sure.
I think it's hard to tell how the album might be cut up, but I think that he probably, he kept them still, and part of that was just through his like defiance and his really effective use of his own persona and stuff like that. But no, I agree with you. The other thing, but I mean, even the 18 Cars Full of Men, think about what could have been is really neat. He has a lot of really great lines, and it's like even if you're a person who didn't like really appreciate his poetry as a whole, I
Mhm.
think you could definitely find lines that are good in there, like "sexy as a green and drunken antelope." That is such a funny way, but it somehow is perfect way to describe it.
And when you brought up Raymond Chandler, that's like talking about like the crime writers of
Yeah,
the day. But like he had that one metaphor. What was it? It was something like she looked like a tarantula on an angel food cake or something like that.
yeah,
It's the
something.
same kind of like
Yeah.
like
No, you can tell. Even wasn't his last book called Pulp or something like that? Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So you
it's
can tell that
great.
he probably loved that.
Um if you I can't wait to when I eventually end up doing Pulp on the show, but like the thing about Pulp that was so amazing was that it was like a full-on hard-boiled detective story, but like it was him trying to come to terms with the fact that he was dying. And so the big mystery he was trying to solve through the whole thing was basically like the meaning of his life. And that just was I think that book gets overlooked a lot because the book itself is a metaphor written by somebody who had very little use for metaphor.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out then.
Yeah, Celine plays a big part in it.
Oh, the writer.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, well, I haven't read the one. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Make
Or-
sure I do it before you do your episode on it. Another thing, the sex fiends one, its strategy is just to go up and proposition every single one. Female. It reminded I'd been watching like King of the Hill again,
Mhm.
and the Mike Judge, like the cartoon show, and there's a Boomhauser. That's
Yeah,
his strategy for
totally.
women, and
The one where Bobby's like, "How do you get in?" Yeah,
he's like, oh, this is. He just goes up to every single woman. It's like,
yeah,
hey, you know. It's a strange thing to think of when I was listening to
yeah.
Bukowski, but it reminded me of
You only hit the balls you swing at, dude.
it. That's awesome.
It's such a
Uh,
good, it's such good advice, man.
there's another. I thought of Mike Judge another time too. There's the poem. Which one is it? Let me look through these. there is the moment. Oh yeah, in Hot, where it's like him trying, like the character trying to get back home before his girl leaves or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Reminded me of this moment. Mike Judge made this movie called Extract. It's not a great movie, but it has a hilarious beginning to where he's trying to get back home to his wife before she puts her sweatpants on.
Yeah, yeah,
Reminded me of that.
yeah.
No.
You probably know this. Like, do you know that show Californication?
Yeah.
That show was supposed to be about Bukowski.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and when it was originally pitched to him, he wanted Harry Dean Stanton to play him,
Oh,
and
interesting.
he was like really like hard on it. He's like, "No, I really want Harry Dean to play me." And they were like, "No, we want like a younger, more attractive person."
Oh, yeah, they got
So
who is that guy?
David Duchovny.
The Covenant, yeah.
So they ended up waiting until after he died and then did the show.
I, that's funny.
But then I also really feel like,
Oh, okay.
which like when you start really dissecting the Big Lebowski, like it's like, oh shit, yeah, Lebowski, Bukowski, the whole thing, you know?
I never thought about that, but that does make sense.
Yeah. But obviously, if you just looked at Bukowski during the period where he was just writing, and then you took out the fact that he was a writer and you just had his life, like you basically would have that.
That's true. That's true.
Like a guy who doesn't understand anything that's happening around him, but things just happen and he allows it as it just unfolds with him,
Yeah.
you know?
But I love too that in the Big Lebowski they make all these characters, they're not really have anything going on in their life, but they give them like all these like kind of like philosophical sides, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
That makes sense.
about it. But yeah, no, it's hysterical, like the impact Bukowski's had on culture that I don't know. I don't really feel like a lot of people notice it because I feel like even though he's probably one of the biggest poets and writers to at least come out of America. I mean, it's probably arguable, but he's still very niche and very
Yeah.
cult. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I
No,
feel
that's
like a lot of people also like hide the fact that they like him. You know, like if it's like not or not even that they like him, but that they've read him. You know, his books probably aren't the ones that you have in the bookcase in the living room. They might be on the bookcase in the bedroom. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. Um well, I was going to ask you because I was reading that he was a little bit more recognized in like in Europe. Was that true?
Totally. Yeah. He's
What was
like
the nature of that?
he's a fucking rock star in Germany and France and shit,
Okay.
in Italy. One of the things is that he found a translator back in the like late 60s, early 70s, who was a big
Okay.
stuff, who ended up like working as an agent for him over there and got his
Mhm.
books put out with the biggest company in the biggest publisher in Germany. And so that was like a big coup.
Okay.
And so he was doing really good. But the thing that made him a legend was he went on a show in France, where they would have like literary minds and philosophers come on and just discuss stuff. And he went on the show, I think it was called Apostrophe.
Okay.
The guy who hosted the show was like this really well-to-do. Like, what's that actor studio guy? James Lipton.
Okay.
Like, I assume that this guy was like on the level of James Lipton or higher. Like
Okay.
people respect him. And Bukowski went on the show and was drunk because he was nervous about going on and was drinking on the show and then started like he grabbed one of the girls that was on the show, and then he started cussing out the um, guy who was hosting it, and he just got up and walked off. And then
Okay.
allegedly he like pulled a knife on one of the security guards in the back when he was like trying to get out.
Oh my gosh.
But because he like went against, and again, this is the 70s, like
Yeah,
70s, he went against the like cultural authority. He became like a
sure.
fucking like a legend out there.
Okay. Well, I mean that makes sense, and I mean, what year would you said that would have been?
Um, that was probably 78, 79, maybe.
Okay, so I mean, it just like a lot of his attitudes are so in line with like, some of the like punk movements that were starting
Totally.
to come out around the same time. So I wonder if
Yeah.
that has to do with it too.
Yeah, but like his books probably sold. I don't know if they do now, but they sold a lot better. Because I think one of the audio recordings you could listen to, it's either Hostage or something like that, but it's at a German during that trip at a place in Germany, and the place is like crazy loud. Like that
Okay.
place was packed. Um, but yeah, he did really well overseas. And I think the title, I can't remember what book it was, but one of his books, the title they used over there was called The Fuck Machine.
Okay.
And so that like gave him more like credit as like a legend. And then
Uh, that's awesome.
there was an Italian movie, I think made in the 70s, like late 70s or early 80s, based off of Tales of Ordinary Madness.
Uh-huh.
And so that helped um,
Okay. Okay.
legitimize him over there too. So yeah.
Gotcha. No, that is kind of he obviously has had an effect, and he is one of those guys. I mean, he for one thing, he must be one of the last really popular American poets, right? Like who comes after him who would have anywhere like even close to his popularity as a poet? I don't know who.
I mean,
Uh,
like you would know way more than I would, but like as soon as like not soon, but like all of those people, like your Frank O'Hara's and your
yeah, they were kind of like
and
they
uh,
were sort of I feel like they were sort of before him,
yeah,
basically.
like
Yeah,
50s
yeah,
and 60s, right? Like their
yeah,
rise or
yeah.
whatever.
And they kind of there's a lot of there was crossover for sure, but I
Yeah.
mean the confessional poets would have been um yeah, their time would have kind of been ending
Because
when
I
they
mean,
started
I
kind
would
of
go like
rising.
maybe like because like John Berryman was already. I mean, John Berryman was never as big as Bukowski.
No, no way.
Yeah.
No.
So I mean, Sylvia Plath, but and then she was before, and Ginsberg was before, Kerouac was before.
Yeah. Yeah, I
The
can't
thing
think
that's
of
weird is that he was writing during the time they were huge too, but he just
yeah.
wasn't anything yet. Like the only
Yeah.
reason why Bukowski, I think, is as famous as he was because he didn't die like when everybody else did. You know what I'm saying? Was a,
Yeah.
he was around long enough to write so much fucking shit. And like you
Yeah.
could have a lot of bad poems when you write that much shit. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, because
Well, yeah, it depends on it
like
depends on how it comes out, of
like
course,
most
but
people will tell you, as long as you have like 1 to 3 good poems in a collection, you're a legend. You know, and it's like if he's putting out 300-page books every year, like there's bound to be a banger in there, at least one, you know?
yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to look at other popular poets, and I guess
Oh,
the
Rupi Kaur, I guess.
well, yeah, but I mean, I feel like I don't imagine anyone is really going to remember her, though. You know what I mean? I guess Maya Angelou maybe is one of the closest, right? She came
Yeah.
after him, sort of, maybe, because she's definitely in. But I feel like even like people don't know her as much as they know Bukowski. So yeah, Anyway, not to keep spending time on that, but it's
Oh,
interesting.
that's very interesting.
It's interesting how well, I guess you would say Mary Oliver.
Who?
Mary Oliver.
Yeah, but I don't think
It's
any
a
like I don't want to say no one knows who Mary Oliver is, but like that's not like a household name.
well, no, but I think people would actually know her poems just because they're so like inoffensive and stuff.
Yeah.
Like they're printed on stuff and things like that, you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
decorative things sometimes. Yeah, but anyway, no, I mean, it was definitely and I mean it's a moment in time too. Like I feel like there are so many people who came after him who tried to sort of like imitate, and usually not poets,
Yeah.
but like a lot of novelists and even other kinds of writers who tried to like imitate his style. You know what I mean? Like his thing.
Yeah,
You
give me
know,
some examples because you said earlier, like there's people who you think do what he does, but do it better. So give me
oh
some.
no no no. Well, I don't like his style of poetry. I mean, this is gonna sound like I'm blowing smoke up your ass, but I like your poems better than his.
Well, I appreciate that a great deal.
You're kind of the person I was thinking of. I like a lot of your stuff better than his, um, and um, there's a couple people you have mentioned on the show before that when I went and read their poems, I it still wasn't something that like really super resonated with me necessarily. But
Mhm.
when I read them, I thought that they were sort of similar to what he was doing, but that I kind of liked them better.
Yeah.
But then I guess I can't remember their names, and I know him, so
Well,
it
like
doesn't really matter.
one poet from that period that I like, Doug Blazik.
Yes, okay, yeah, yeah. I was thinking of him. Okay,
Yeah, like
that's the name I couldn't remember.
I think he had a period where he was writing things better than Bukowski, but then he had a longer period of where he wrote stuff that was just to me,
Awful.
I mean, I don't want to say awful, that's fucking mean, but like I don't know another way of saying it, but like just stuff that I do not feel like any connection to or any um I don't know, just like it just doesn't grab me. And so to me, like having, I don't know, 8 years of great work followed by um 25, 30 years of mediocre stuff kind of kills what you would have. But like I feel like there's, and that's the, to me, the allure of Bukowski because like he for the most part was very fucking consistent for
Yeah.
decades. And I'm sure that was something that he was very cognizant of because he hated a lot of people that he liked at one point and then ended up hating. Like he really dug Ezra Pound for like the beginning of Ezra Pound's career and then fucking thought he was like a hack bullshit motherfucker. But there were a lot of guys that he really loved. Sherwood Anderson's what was that book he wrote? The Ohio one. What's it called? It's
Winesburg, Ohio.
yeah, there you go. Like he
Okay, yeah,
really dug
Winesburg,
that.
Ohio.
There were a lot of people that he and even Celine, like Journey to the End of the Night is like one of his favorite books. But after that, he really didn't care for a lot of the shit that Celine did after that.
Okay. I mean, I even knew, like, I did know a story about that when Eraserhead came out, he really loved David Lynch, but then I guess it was he and Linda, I guess, met David Lynch, or no, maybe he just by himself met David Lynch, and he felt like David Lynch was too, he didn't like David Lynch's attitude, and so he kind of like disowned liking him or something like that.
Dude, the funny thing is that like he because he had the same thing with Blazik. Like he said, I'm trying to remember how he said it. Like people in letters are much different than they are in person. And not
Yeah.
lot of times, like when you're writing letters to people, and this is probably true with email to an extent, although I think email we are too abrupt. Um,
Yeah.
when it
We're
comes
not
to
putting that much
those.
care into it as a letter.
Yeah. When you write letters, you are more profound. You are more whatever. And then you meet someone in person, and it's kind of like you just sit there and stare at each other.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah, because if you write a letter, I mean, you could spend an entire day thinking about what to say in your letter. But
yeah. And it's funny too, like there's that whole bit when I can't remember if it's in I think it's in Women where he was reading somewhere and then the next night Burroughs was going to be reading. And
oh,
and the promoter's like, "Do you want to stay and watch Burroughs?" And he's like, "No." And he's like, "Well, Burroughs is staying next door. Do you want to see him?" And he's like, "No." And he's like, "Yeah, I told Burroughs that Bukowski's next door." And Burroughs said, "Oh." And that's it. And then he said, like, when he left, he walked by and saw Burroughs looking out the window, and Burroughs saw him, and neither one of them did anything. It's just
that's hilarious.
like people are never who you think they're gonna be.
Yeah.
And that's true as fuck, dude. Like,
I
there's all
mean,
sorts of people I've met that I was like, man, I loved you until I fucking met you, and you're a piece of shit.
yeah. The funny thing about creating art is just that there are so many different things that can drive you to create art. You know what I mean? Like on a recent episode of Slee Ricketts,
I was just gonna bring this up, dude. I was
uh,
just gonna
what
bring
were you
this
going
up.
to bring up? I was going to bring up is that, well, I don't know if I was going to bring up the same thing probably, but Matthew just said that he felt that he has this theory that all poets are, they feel like they're outsiders for some reason, like
Yeah.
no matter who they are. And there's something about feeling like just disconnected that makes you, especially an art form like poetry, I
Mhm.
think. But what were you going to bring up about
That's
that?
not what I was gonna bring up. That's
I
so
did
funny.
think I was like, I don't think that's going.
So it's funny because like Matt must be going through something right now. But but there was an episode a little while ago because I haven't listened to Slee Ricketts. I haven't listened to any podcasts in probably over a year.
I
And
get it.
I'm just getting back into like catching up on all the shows I used to like and stuff. But him and Brian were talking about like how it's weird how like when you're an artist, you suddenly like are just hanging out with artists all the time, or when you're a writer, you're just hanging out
Yeah.
with writers. And Brian's like, I don't know any. But yeah, I was just gonna say, like, do you remember that episode where Brian was talking about how he
No,
like
yeah. And yeah.
and
I-
Bucks was like, "What are you talking about? Are you serious? What?" He just like couldn't like believe it. But yeah, like there's this weird thing where artists have to, not that they have to, but it's almost like it's um expected that you would like be friends with other artists or other writers. And there's that whole iron sharpens iron thing, which I
Mhm.
get. But I don't think that's the case. Like, because I don't know if people really share their stuff with each other. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
people get into groups together like they used to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the thing about being a writer is that, I mean, often you can have like you can be in fellowship with people you don't even know because you read their work, or people who are dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just just by reading their work is sort of like a friendship. So I mean, I feel like as writers we often are very isolated, and I think there's a lot to that. You know, like um and there's always all kinds of jealousies, and you know the things that make you want to write are so various. I mean, and a lot of times the thing, you know, you don't really want to become an artist and share your work with the world without a little bit of egotism, narcissism, something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because to write or to make some kind of art and to say, I think other people should read this does take a certain amount of like selfishness and you know, just not even confidence, because so many artists are not confident, but just like confidence that maybe someone should read what you're doing.
I'm
It,
trying
it's
to
a
remember. I'm
it's a
trying to.
little bit egotistic or whatever you want to say, you know?
Yeah, like I wrote a poem about this time I met this woman that I
Hmm.
was really into or whatever. And I was just in tears writing this poem. And I thought it was like the most like magical fucking thing in the world. And I showed it to her and she read it. And then she said, huh, okay, that's not as bad as I thought it would be. And I'm like, oh. And then she said, she's like, yeah, I can't believe you took an experience of mine and turned it into something so self-indulgent. And I
Wow.
was like, fuck, dude.
That's wow, that's a hard.
Yeah,
Uh,
but like, so ever since she said that to me, I'm like, oh my God, like art is so self-indulgent.
it
Like
certainly is, yeah.
every fucking thing. Like, god damn. Like, so that was kind of a kick in the balls, but also like she ain't lying, I guess. You know, like I took
It's
something that
yeah,
happened to her and I turned it into something that happened to me,
yeah.
you know?
No, I mean it is true. I mean, like we have to be honest about these kinds of things. I mean, maybe people you could say, you know, it used to in artists were often you know, before the days of the printing press, artists were often anonymous.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a little less self-indulgent, but I still think even if it's anonymous, there's a part of it like I did that. Like you don't
Yeah.
set out to create, even if you're going to be anonymous, without feeling like, yeah, I'm so awesome that other people ought to see what I'm thinking in my head.
Totally. There was somebody who used to be an anarchy crew that would come to the writing Zooms and they when we were working on broadsides, like that was like the thing we were doing at the time. He I was encouraging everyone to like write a broadside and like put it out.
Mhm.
And he wrote one anonymously and then like stuck it on this like statue in like a town square thing.
That's cool.
But like, yeah, and it's cool. And like the reason why he made it anonymous was because it was about the government and he was like going
Oh yeah.
against the government and everything like that. So I totally get it. But
Hmm.
it's the same thing. Like you're not going to put your name on it, but like you feel like,
Yeah.
you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just like talking about like just being like self-indulgent and taking people's lives and turning it into your own stuff. Like, I mean, Bukowski made a fucking living doing that.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the stories that he tells about himself, like he's said numerous times, weren't his stories. Like there were
Hmm.
people that he knew that told good stories. And so he would have them come around to tell
And
him
then he'd steal
stories
their story.
and that he would like put in his books and shit.
Yeah. No,
So,
I mean that's you know, great artists steal, right? That's what they say.
right.
Well, one thing, okay, so that brings up a good point. You were talking about his book Women, and I wanted to ask you about this, and that is related stuff. One thing I wanted to ask you about, since you're you know the authority on Bukowski here, is there. I noticed so in a lot of his like more like uh, sexually charged stuff. There is this. Well, one thing I noticed about Bukowski, and this is sort of what makes him, I think, lovable to a certain extent into the grimy stuff of life. He has this boyishness to him.
Yeah.
Even his kind of like nerding, or the fact that he gets so nervous to appear, or um, have they actually ever had sex before? Like they're being so dirty, but they're focusing on things that it's like most people wouldn't focus on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
has almost like that sort of boyish dirtiness sometimes in some of his sex poems and writings.
Yeah.
And another thing that also I feel like is sort of the same side of him is that even like his dirtiest poems often end in sort of like a sweet way
Yeah.
almost.
Well,
There was
they,
one,
yeah.
yeah, and it's almost a similar impulse. And the best love poem I can write at the moment has a similar kind of side to it. There's a few others like what's another one I was thinking of. The hot one is kind of like that. yeah, those are definitely some of the ones like that. And I feel like there's a similarity in several of those. Like the shower one is the one that actually made me think that. Where it's like he's getting so detailed and graphic, but then
Yeah.
it ends in this sort of sweet way. So there's sort of this like boyish like side to him. Do you feel like that's accurate?
Um, yeah, and I feel like a lot of that too comes from, and like this is where, and I don't want to talk shit on feminists or anything like that. I'm not trying to do that, but preface. But a lot of that came from the fact that back then, and it is now too. I just talked to another writer who's having to do this to make ends meet. But a lot of the writing he did that actually paid him to where he didn't have to work or whatever was writing for the dirty magazines.
Yeah.
So he would have to write a lot of really crass, crude shit, and that got his shit sold. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of the over the top, crass, dirty shit came from that, where he was like, wow, people really like this. I'm getting paid for it. And the dirtier I make it, the more money I get for stuff. Let me see if I could add this into poetry. Because, like, a lot of his early stuff isn't that graphic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Wasn't until, to me at least, until after he started writing for the nudie mags that a lot of that stuff started coming up into his work. But as far as like his, like, I don't want to say boyish naivete, but like the bravado, because even if you read his like stories or like Ham on Rye about like when he was a kid, and
Hmm.
like him and his friends would talk about like, ooh, man, when I get married, I'm gonna just like go all day and da 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 da. And my wife's gonna have like a hole cut in the front of her nightgown just so I could always just put it in her. And also, it's that whole like, I don't want to say machismo, but like you're telling stories to your friends to make them
Yeah.
think that you've done stuff and that you're cool, but like you actually have no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
that's what reminded me so much about like I said, the mention like a lot of young rappers
Yeah.
in the current day, to where they're always talking about this stuff, and of course it's like influenced by like a lot of like the Atlanta rappers like Future or
Yeah.
the Migos or whatever. But it's like, I mean, I'm sure that they've had sex, but it's like
But they
it's like
had
if
it
you
for
told me
they
they
had
had
it for themselves, and that's
yeah.
it. Like they weren't
Because
like,
they're talking about stuff. It's like, what?
yeah.
No reasonable person would
When
think
you
about
started
this.
talking about that, this is so kind of off topic but on topic. But like that J. Cole song, um, No Role Models.
Yes, yeah, yeah, I know that song.
Like that's like one of my favorite songs. And I love the like realizations that he
Hmm.
comes to in that song.
Yeah,
And like I don't know, I just think that song is so like powerful when it comes to like like what the fuck am I doing? Like why am I treating women this way? Like
yeah,
how am I going to do things better? You know,
yeah,
but also like I need to be like looking different places for the women that I'm sleeping with, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
I don't know why that happened, but yeah,
No, no,
that's
no, no. I mean, it's a yeah, it's that's a good song. Yeah, that's a J. Cole classic for sure. I was
yeah.
just
The Bukowski podcast has turned into a Slee Ricketts fan cast and a rap.
rap lyrics.
Yeah,
There was the one that, oh well, kind of I just lumped it in with the Dostoevsky thing, but the
yeah,
earthquake poem he did. I don't know if that's like one of his most memorable poems of all time, but um, it has this interesting thing in it where he's talking about like basically getting bombed, but not with an atom bomb, but just like a blockbuster. And it reminded me of the end of the Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451,
yeah,
where basically all these bombs are coming down on the city but they're not really atom bombs or anything like that. But it just
Yeah.
kind of is like I wonder if he had Ray Bradbury in mind at all. But also it's just an interesting image. He's saying like it's devastating, but it's not really the thing that everyone makes the biggest. It's an awful thing that's happening, but it's not the biggest thing that everyone's most worried about, which would have been during
Yeah.
the Cold War, like the atom bomb. It's kind of an interesting moment. Kind of made me wonder what he was doing there.
There's another, like, he writes about the bomb in air quotes,
Yeah,
because everyone was fucking worried about that back then.
right.
But there's this other poem he has that I think he reads in this the Sweetwater reading, where he talks about how most people that you run into that are pieces of shit are pieces of shit because their moms never said no to them and their houses have never been bombed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
that's awesome.
but it comes back to that where um not that he's like mad at the elite, but that he's more pissed off at the entitlement that people who have not suffered at all seem to have.
Yeah,
And
yeah. He did suffer for sure. Like he certainly
yeah,
did.
but I mean, but he also didn't have his house bombed. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah. And I mean, I think that he would have expected his audience to know that. I think probably. I mean, he
Yeah.
was, although I mean, he grew up. How old was he when they moved from Germany to?
Oh, he was just a baby.
Okay,
He
okay,
was little.
okay.
Yeah.
The other another one that reminded me is my friend Andre. That it's got.
So
Is
cute.
he doing a French accent? Is that what
I
he's
don't
trying to?
know what the fuck that is, dude.
Because at first, because it corresponds with saying something about corresponds with like talking about Oriental fighters. Then he goes into this accent, and I'm like, is he doing like a Chinese accent? But then I was like, wait a minute, maybe Andre is supposed to be French, and that's supposed to be a French accent he's doing.
Yeah.
But regardless, it felt like he probably had disdain for the French, like a good German would.
Right.
I mean, I know his dad is actually
Yeah, for real.
um, no, there's this hilarious thing talking about the Germans hating the French. There's this video I just saw recently of Werner Herzog. I love Werner Herzog, but it was like an interview. They asked him how many different languages he spoke. And well, first of all, he's like, well, I don't really speak very many languages, but then he lists like a bunch of different languages that he speaks. But then he
Mhm.
has this hilarious thing that in typical Werner Herzog fashion, he's like, well, I could speak French, but you can only get me to speak French if you put gun to my head. And he's like, that did happen to me. Then he goes into the story, but he's like, I will never speak French.
Yeah, if you read Hollywood, which is another good Bukowski novel, but he meets Werner Herzog in that, and he meets David Lynch in that.
Oh, that's interesting.
But like he has funny names for all of them, so
Okay, what's
they're
he
not
called?
like they're not the. It's not like Werner Herzog. It's like Zerner Werghog or something.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I wonder what Werner Herzog thought of Bukowski. I'm sure he probably had a thought.
Oh yeah, for
Uh,
real.
as yeah, I was,
Yeah, I
I was
think
finding
if I remember correctly, they got along pretty good in that bit.
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. In that poem, he has the piss and shit poem. He's
Yeah.
like talking shit on D.H. Lawrence.
Is
Talking
that
about
the one? Is that the one where he is wondering what his piss would be like or what it would be like to.
yeah.
Yeah.
He says that D.H. Lawrence has piss snobbery. Yeah. Yeah, but that's another one. He's like he has a line there, like "I'm one of these uneducated minnows of the age," is what it sounds like he says in
Yeah.
that one. Yeah, but yeah, it's like a double thing. But at the same poem, he's talking about D.H. Lawrence. He's talking about being uneducated, which
Yeah.
he obviously is not uneducated. Yeah, that was a funny one. No,
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah. I think I don't know. Like I feel like he does or I don't know. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I always think that he tried so hard to gain acceptance, but acted like he never wanted it. But
Of
like
course, yeah.
he just wanted people to know that he wasn't as stupid as they thought he was, I guess is
Yeah.
the best way to put it.
Yeah, and that's
He wanted to
again why
do
I think
anything with it, but just that that was the case.
his attitude reminds me of like a good stand-up. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And like a Lenny Bruce or a a lot of those kind of guys. But it's that kind of like there is this line that comics have to, whether it's like comic actors have or comedians, stand-up comedians have to walk, to where it's like they often are acting so stupid that
Yeah.
like high society, like the literati types or the critics think that they are. And it's like, there's this thing to where you've got all these great comic actors and they only ever win an award if they make like a quote unquote serious movie.
For
But it's
real.
like being a comic actor is so much harder than being a serious actor. I
Hmm.
mean, well, I mean, I don't know from experience, I'm not an actor, but there are so many fewer comic actors than there are dramatic actors. So
Yeah.
that leads me to assume that it must be, it must be more special. But it's a hard line. I mean, you've got comic actors who obviously get jealous of not getting recognition, and
Yeah.
then they kind of try to get critical recognition, and then they just go into complete irrelevance.
Yeah. Well, just like Bukowski said, like he's like, some of these have to be serious. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
But like
He
with
did walk a pretty
actors,
good.
like most actors have no personality at all and
Yeah,
funny at all. And then a lot of your comedic actors that are in Hollywood and stuff think they're very funny and they're not funny at all. So the
yeah,
ones that actually can pull it off are fucking amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to someone recently. Like I really love Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
Like even still as a comedian, like I still love his like Netflix movies even.
Yeah.
And I think that he's a guy like he is still like all these years later, all these years after SNL and everything, he is still making so much money off of comedy movies.
Yeah.
And he is interesting to me because he has successfully walked this tightrope to where he has been able to convince critics that he is a good actor by every once in a while appearing in like a quote unquote serious movie, whether that be like with Paul Thomas Anderson
Yeah.
um, like the Safdie brothers or whatever. And he gets on the critics' radar and they praise him, but it's like the classic saying like one for you, one for me. Except for
Mhm.
him, the one for you is doing the serious movies, and
Yeah.
the one for me is doing the comedy stuff. But it's an interesting tightrope, and I can see it's a tight kind of like a tightrope that I can see in some of the stuff like Bukowski walking himself.
Yep. 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 So let's do the whole where people can find you thing.
Sure, yeah. So I am have pretty much all of my stuff that you can find in one way or another at my Substack website, theflummoxed.substack.com. And you might have to, if you have it in the show notes there, they might have to look, but it's basically the word theflummoxed.substack.com. And I try to make that my place where I put everything, whether that be stuff I publish, essays that I publish there, my podcast is there.
Yeah.
So that's the best place for people to look. I've recently tried to get off most social media, so that's the best place.
Cool. Yeah, I will definitely have that in the notes. And thank you so much for doing this, man. I know it
Yeah,
was.
man, absolutely, a lot of fun.
Listen, I don't know what else to do with you guys.
So that was my conversation with Ethan. I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to come on the show and talk about a Bukowski related topic or piece of his work, let me know. You can write me at what I'll have the email address down below. I think it's BukowskiPod or BukowskiPodcast@gmail.com. I don't know. I'll look. Or you could just hit me up. I hate mattwall@gmail.com. Pitch me your idea. Or let me know you want to do it and I'll throw a couple at you and you can pick. Again, Septuagenarian Stew in the Bukowski Book Club is what we're on right now. Make sure you do not forget that this weekend, June 28th and 29th, is the big sale, the store launch at mattwallart.com, where you could get limited edition signed and numbered chapbooks and original pieces of my art. And if you are a channel member on YouTube in the Anarchy Crew, you get an extra 10%, which will give you 50% off of your purchase this weekend only. Run over to theflummox.substack.com to check out Ethan's podcast and all of his musings, and go pick up his book, Apocalypse Stance, out now. Type hard, everybody. Keep buying my books, keep buying my art, so be careful when you bend over.
Let's call it quits.